magnificent.
First pen.
Yeah, for sure.
How about yourself, Rick?
Oh yeah, Luke. Our TED lecture is online on.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Long time no see, Luke. Long time no see.
It has been. Where have you been, stranger?
Home. Home, sorry, in the room.
Did you submit yesterday?
I submitted, I was messing around with you. Oh, was it today? Oh my god.
Oh, you were actually. Okay.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Oh, for goodness sake. Give it a minute, Reese, see if anyone else pitches up. Just by means of introduction, that's me, Lincoln Evans. I am a colleague of Reese's in, we're not the Department of Media anymore, we're in the subject area of media and communication, but in the Department of Language, Literature and Communication. Is that right? Something like that? You can see I paid a lot of attention to the restructuring of everything, so I don't even know what department I'm in. So my research background is really the philosophy of technology. Over the past, I'd say 6 years now, one of my research focuses has been virtual and augmented reality. When I was doing my PhD a million years ago, my initial intention was to do a PhD on virtual reality. Became very interested in virtual reality when I was a kid. When I was like 12, 13 years old, and it was supposed to be the next big thing. It was going to take off, 92, 93. Virtual reality was going to be everything. And then nothing happened. So when I came out to do my PhD in about 2009, I kind of vaguely wanted to know what was going on in the field, and guess what? Nothing was happening. So I did my PhD on something completely different. And it took a while, but then in 2016 I actually came back around to it. So in the meantime, I've written several papers and a couple of books on virtual reality over the past few years. One just came out last month? Yeah. It's just a blur. I don't know when things happen at the moment. Who cares? Which I think is in the library. I think. I've ordered it for the library, whether it's there or not, I don't know. So, a couple of minutes to see if anyone else comes in. This will be available on my YouTube channel, but I guess I can put it on Panopto as well, to make it easier. I don't want to force people into monetizing my content on YouTube, but, you know, help a brother out, you know what I'm saying? And you can go and check out all my other courses on YouTube as well. You know, they're not interesting, but you can knock yourself out. If you want to find out about video games or first year media studies, knock yourself out. Just by a show of hands, how many of you have tried virtual reality? Not that many. Okay.
We sort of have to. We sort of have to.
You guys, it's part of the deal, right? Yeah.
I feel shortchanged if I hadn't.
It would be a terrible MSc in VR if you hadn't even put a headset on. Yeah, talk about doing something in the abstract.
Just imagine what it could be like.
Yeah, I'm not going to show you, but think about it. Right, I will make a start, then it's 5 past. So, the title of this lecture, which should take about an hour, I hope, because I know usually you do a seminar with Reese following it. I'm going to leave for the seminar because I believe the seminar reading is chapter 3 of my book.
That's next week.
That's next week, is it? Oh, thank God for that. All right, because I don't want to be there when these tear it apart. So, you know, knock yourselves out if you want to criticise me, but I'm not going to stand in the room and let you hammer me remorselessly. Title for today, Escaping the Real World. So, my perspective on virtual reality, as I will outline in this lecture, is about why. Why do this? If you can imagine, virtual reality is a way of recreating the interface between humans and computers. Instead of the traditional interface that we have had since the early 1970s, the keyboard, the mouse, the screen, the positionality of us and the subject position of us as being interactive with our body in a particular way towards computers. And the interface being very well established over that time. Virtual reality is a different way of interfacing with computer and digital technology. It is an entirely different way of approaching how we interact with computers. And when, I'll go into the history in a short while, but when virtual reality was first conceptualized in the 1960s, it was conceptualized as a different way of having a relationship between a human and a computer. So in the age of cybernetic theory, this was seen as an extension of the kind of biological feedback loops that cybernetic theorists were talking about, Norbert Wiener, etc., about how we would interact with computers. This raises two questions for us. One, why haven't you tried it? If this is a revolutionary and new way of interfacing with digital technology, why isn't it everywhere? Why is it still a niche occupation? Why is it still a niche activity for people? Why isn't it huge? So there's one point. Second point is, where are we going with it? One company in particular is betting the farm that in the next few years, this is going to take off in a big way. This will be the future of how we interact with the digital itself. They are putting everything in. It is the stupidest bet I have ever seen. It's going to bankrupt this company. And do you know what? I hate the company anyway, so I want them to go bankrupt. But, because evil companies deserve what they get. But it's interesting, fundamentally interesting in terms of the future of human-computer interaction itself. Why one company and one company alone is thinking this is going to be the future and we're going to own it. So, escaping the real world. Keep that in mind. Or, of course, there's no interface between the screen and the keyboard. So I'm going to cover what is VR, why is VR important in contemporary culture, how has social media been implemented through the medium of VR as a case of what we are looking at, and what can VR tell us about the future of social media and therefore media in general and our relationship with computers. VR has been around for a very, very long time. The first mention of virtual reality in literature comes in 1938. So, pre-digital media, people were thinking about this kind of interface. The illusory nature of characters and objects in the theatre as a la réalité virtuelle. In English, a translation of that is virtual reality. It's interesting that the idea of having illusory characters and objects, completely artificial characters and objects, a virtual reality, was conceptualized outside of the digital age itself. This has been thought about for a great number of years, and it also conceptualizes exactly what virtual reality is in terms of how we experience it. A virtual reality environment is artificial. It is built from the ground up. Even if I am in virtual reality. That is a digital twin of my identity. It is not me. This is a created representation of me, which is digital in form. I am not physically this stuff in that environment. The buildings in there, the objects in there, these are digital objects. These are not physical objects. They might have physical properties, and a lot of work in virtual reality goes around trying to recreate a sense of physical realism of objects and things within the virtual environment to make it feel more real than real. But nothing is real. It is all an illusion. The trick is to make this thing think that it's real. If you crack that, you've made a good virtual world. As long as you can trick the brain into thinking, oh yeah, what I do here is significant and real, then that's important. First messing around with virtual reality as a concept in the early 60s. We have here Morten Hellig's Sensorama from 1962, one of the earliest examples of an immersive media machine, an immersive media device. And as we can see, it's pretty primitive. You basically shove somebody's head into a sensory deprivation chamber, lock out the world, and focus attention purely on the field of vision that is being given to you at that point in time. That principle is today. If you put on a Quest 2 headset, you are locking out your visual field from anything else and focusing visual attention and indeed auditory attention, because you would usually use headphones for this, to cut out sensory overload from outside to focus on a particular digital image or set of digital images which constitute a digital experience. So the principle of virtual reality is in the Sensorama. And there's a clue here, Sensorama. Bombard these particular senses in a particular way so you cut out the reality around you and create a different form of immersive experience for a user. So, 1962, what are we now? 2022? 60 years. Now, people say virtual reality is new. Let's think about the word new for a moment. Say, I'm going out and, got to get a new car, right? So I go to the second-hand car dealership. I've got a new car for you. And he takes me to a 60-year-old vehicle. I'm going to punch him in the face several times. How dare you tell me that someone 60 years old is new? I'm 43 years old. I ain't new. There's parts of me that are like 90 years old at this point, right? So, new. I may be labouring the point here, but VR ain't new. Okay, it's been around a while. Big step forward. Developed in the 1960s with the help of the US military. There's Ivan Sutherland's Sword of Damocles. Rhys, can you add some context to this? What do you know of Ivan Sutherland?
I'm not sure it's being discussed on this model, but Sketchpad
Yes.
is one of his. The idea of using a light pen first to draw on a screen and create something.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, is anyone using a tablet? No? Okay. But you're familiar with the principle of using a pen on a tablet, right? Mm-hmm. Sutherland. That was his idea. 1964, I think. 64, Sutherland thinks, interfaces we have with computers at the moment, boring. Let's do something new. So he came up with the idea of the light pen, a way of naturally interfacing with a computer by using a form of inscription which we are actually familiar with in everyday life. Some people are writing that. It's old school, but it still has charm. Sutherland, in the 1960s, his entire work during that time was about trying to reimagine how we interface with digital technology. So the light pen and sketchpad was an attempt to re-engineer how humans and computer interface with one another. And so was the Sword of Damocles, this incredibly intricate piece of equipment which looks like something out of a hospital. When I see something like this, I expect somebody's broken leg to be like hoisted up on it, and and that person to be in a lot of pain with a bit of luck, because we like seeing people in pain. Interesting. I'll come to why pain is important in a second. So, Sutherland developed the Sword of Damocles, a headset which used two asymmetric screens to project images through one each to create a stereoscopic image for the user. This was literally hoisted on a winch because it weighed a ton. This is a really heavy piece of equipment. In order for these elements to work, this is sort of pre-digital projection. So you actually had CRT tubes projecting this image. They're heavy. Probably give people cancer as well, which doesn't help. This, if you like, is the first actual, real virtual reality headset. Locks out the visual field, also provides an auditory experience, and is literally a headset. It's not like the Sensorama where you simply popped your head into a little cage and locked out the world, and you're basically watching TV. This was actually playing with the idea of direct projection of images through a headset itself. Now, the point about the weight is very important to you. For one poor volunteer from the US military who was trying out this technology, the chain broke, and he broke his neck. Literally, as soon as the chain that was hoisting this piece of equipment snapped, it was so heavy, it snapped the guy's neck. VR is dangerous. You've all seen videos of people on YouTube, right, doing VR, and they swing in their arms about, they smash a TV, right? It's nothing compared to this. This guy's neck broke. So it's a long history of people getting badly hurt using virtual reality. And I encourage you all to try virtual reality, and don't hurt yourselves, but other people. Swing your arms around. You don't know what you're doing. Smack them about a bit. Feel the physical power of this medium. The first head-mounted display, as we call it. The head-mounted display is a critical technical aspect of what a virtual reality experience is. We now make a direct assumption that anything in virtual reality must be through this head-mounted display, and it's fairly straightforward what that means. It's on the head, it's mounted in some way, so it's supported, and it's a display of a series of images which we interpret as something which is consistent. So, what is virtual reality? Jaron Lanier is the father of virtual reality. Whereas Ivan Sutherland was making technology in the 1960s, what we understand as virtual reality today, not some monstrosity on a chain in a laboratory somewhere, but a headset which is portable and usable, that vision is really down to Jaron Lanier's work in the 1980s and early 1990s. And Lanier, in his book in 2017, The Dawn of the New Everything, offers 52 definitions of what virtual reality is in that book. Now, that would be the rest of this lecture to go through half of them, so I'm not going to do that. You can quite easily look up what Lanier's definitions are. Some people have done web pages where they've just listed all of the definitions as well. He tries to define in terms of use and context. That's why he has 52 different definitions of what VR is. He tries to exemplify how VR can be used in different situations, and therefore how the definition might vary in that way as well. He draws on the importance of VR for cognition, perception, dreaming, existentialism, phenomenology, the idea of hallucination, the idea of consciousness itself. So he explores these aspects and gives us an indication that VR is not one thing. VR is different things for different people. And VR is different things in different contexts. VR can be for entertainment, it can be for education, it can be for training, it can be for therapy. There's a huge amount of therapeutic use of virtual reality in terms of phobias, in terms of, interestingly, a literary paper that I've written came out yesterday about sexual,
Deviance.
well, there's a bit of that in it, but more sexual therapy in virtual reality was this paper. There's a bit of deviance in it, yeah. Less ambitiously than what Lanier is trying to do, VR has been defined as providing a more intimate interface between humans and computer imagery, to create a sense of imagery, of intimacy between the digital and the user itself. A system that gives a user an experience of being immersed in a synthesized environment, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to dwell on these, you've got the slides. I like Negroponte's VR as being there with a simulated computer world. I think that sums it up really nicely, what VR means for me. It is a sense, not that the computer is here, but I'm in it. I am there with it. And if I am there with it, then there is some kind of world that I have entered, which is digital in itself. This is not a distanced relationship to the digital. This is a close, proximate relationship to the digital. Closer than I would have, usually. Closer than holding the phone in my hand. Closer than having the keyboard in front of me. Closer than looking at that screen. I am immersed in it. I am a part of it. I am there. And that's really simple. Being there just sums it up really nicely. All the definitions are largely similar. They emphasize much the same things. When I was writing my book, I looked through hundreds of definitions of virtual reality before coming up with one of my own. And the one thing that struck me was the use of the same words over and over again. Immersed, interaction, feeling, being, perceiving, participating. These are all verbs which indicate a type of activity. VR is not passive, and we are not passive when we use it. Our relationship with digital technology transforms from being a relationship where the digital is separate from us and we are interacting with it, but we are passively interacting in some way. It is apart from us, instead to being fully embodied and active within the digital environment. This is the transformation. And this is why I emphasize human-computer interaction has been an important aspect of what happens here. Human-computer interaction is radically transformed by this interface. We are no longer interacting in a distanced way with the digital. We are now interacting with it in a very proximal way. We are in it. We are immersed in it. Our interaction is with it. We feel part of it. Our being is in it, not apart from it. We are perceiving the digital. We are not perceiving everything around us. We are participating within the digital rather than participating with the digital. So that stresses that any definition of VR includes some kind of activity, and that VR is therefore not a passive media form. It's active, the user is key in that activity rather than being the content of the VR environment being experienced. What content there is secondary to how we are in that content. A good VR experience, actually we don't really consider the content. We are the core of what's going on in it anyway. We are no longer looking around thinking, oh, that's neat, that's lovely, but it's sad for you guys this, but when you do good work, nobody's going to care. Actually, to do good work is to stop people from caring and to accept that they're in that already. That's when you make a good piece of virtual reality. So, we're in the machine. For VR to work, for a good, effective piece of virtual reality content to be something that people want to use, we're in it. We're no longer apart from it. We are embodied in the digital at that point. And this is the point usually where people like go, oh, I don't want to know anymore. Oh, it's scary. Oh no, I know. It sounds horrible. This sounds like the worst. Yeah, okay. Fair enough. I do question what the hell you would be doing this module for, or like even doing a degree at that point. But yeah, you know, some people at this point are like, no, I'll never try VR. I'll never do it. Good. You know, there were people out there who didn't want to try the electric light bulb. They didn't get far. This is coming. This is going to happen. It's already with us. Prosaically, but I really like this definition. A VR system consists of a series of inputs from the user within an application that are rendered by the hardware in order to produce an output that is experienced by the user as a virtual experience. So what is Gerald actually telling us here? The VR system works by collecting a series of inputs from us as the user, rendering those in a virtual environment to create the illusion that we have agency and activity in that environment, that our activities are being mirrored and reproduced in that environment, so we are an active participant in it, and that is presented back to us to create the illusion of placehood and, you know, the embodiment in that space. A VR system inputs in, output out, just like any other computer system. All computer systems work on this principle. You put stuff in, stuff comes out. It's a fairly simple way of thinking about how digital technology works. VR is no different to this. It is the type of inputs that it is collecting and how it is producing output, which is the significant difference here. The output is far more sophisticated, and indeed the inputs in order for virtual reality to work will be far more sophisticated as well. We are capturing different aspects of our bodies, our interaction, and how we map those things on. Is any of you doing stuff with gloves?
Not yet.
No.
Ah, but I like the word yet in this context, okay. Because that's the next big step, really. So, there is a lot of conflation of VR with other kinds of computer-mediated reality, specifically augmented and mixed reality, both of which can incorporate immersion and interactivity. What I argue is that people should not get confused. You hear augmented reality, you hear mixed reality, and people are like, oh, what virtual, augmented, mixed, what does this all mean? All of these things sit on a continuum with one another. At this point of the continuum over here, we have reality. Now I'm going to move across a little bit, because nobody's ever experienced reality, because all reality is mediated. Your digital media students, that's number one. Everything is mediated. So here's us here, experiencing reality in the mediated form, be that culturally or technologically or so on. It's just this, right? I'm looking through my eyes, take my glasses off, I'm no longer looking for my eyes because I'm blind. Okay? Bunch of furry shit going on here, I'm happy. That's reality. Everyone's here, right? Real. Feel stuff. Over here, we have augmented reality. What is that? What is augmented reality? So tell me.
The overlay of real life mixed in with VR.
No.
As I was saying it, I knew you were going to say no.
But the word overlay, yes. Augmented reality involves the overlay of digital information onto the real, using some kind of device which augments our experience of the real to intermix digital objects or information with.
Google Maps? Is that like Google Maps?
Yeah, well, Google Maps has an AR interface, right? So I don't know if anyone's ever tried AR on Google Maps. I've written about it in the past, where it's a really bad idea, because what you basically do, you get your phone out, get Google Maps up, and in your environment itself, it can pick out things that appear on the mapping interface at that point in time. Those things are the commercial partners of Google. So we have an instance here of where AR is going to come around in a few years' time when they finally get the technology right to put it in glasses properly. And you're going to get a digital overlay of the world in front of you, and it's going to tell you, like, you know, oh, there's a really nice coffee shop up here. Call in for a coffee. Here's 5% off on your little digital interface. And you're going to go, yeah, I love coffee. I love 5% off. I'm down with this. The coffee shop across the road who doesn't advertise with Google is going to go bankrupt because they're not in your field of vision anymore. Sad times for non-Google coffee shop. But that is augmented reality. That is the real overlaid with digital. But we're still on our continuum here, right? I'm kind of in the middle of my continuum. I'm going to go right the way over to the end of the continuum here. Virtual reality is over here. There is no real. It is all generated digitally. Somebody could say, well, actually in virtual reality I can go and, you know, stand on the top of Machu Picchu and have a look around and stuff like that and say, yeah, you can do that, dumbass, but it ain't real. That's a digital representation of what that experience is. It is, you are not standing on Machu Picchu, you are standing on a digital creation of it. You have a digital twin of what that environment is. That ain't real. Virtual reality is artificial. So in our continuum of reality, we have reality over there, which none of us have ever experienced, mediated reality, which all of us are experiencing right now, augmented reality in the middle, and over here we have virtual reality. Virtual reality is the total creation of a digital environment. So when you want to differentiate these different kinds of extended reality technology, they are fairly straightforward to do. People get confused by all of this because people get obsessed with the little things, not the big things. Now, virtual reality in the 80s and 90s, as I said at the beginning, it was going to be huge. I was like, what, 12, 13 years old, 1992. Imagine. There's me, right? A little bit shorter. I'm not exactly tall now, so it wasn't that much of a difference, right? You know, Sonic the Hedgehog t-shirt. Same trainers, probably. Probably same kind of jeans as well. Listening to Nirvana. Reading video game magazines. This is what I did as a kid. Played video games, played football, and it was a glorious time. No phones, anything like that. Well, just concentrate on being in the now. Reading these magazines, and they're telling me, like, next year, 1993, is going to be the year of virtual reality. We're no longer going to be playing games using controllers. You're going to put a headset on, and you're going to experience the game directly. And I'm like, yeah, I want to be in that. I want to be in the video game. You know, I'm growing up in rural West Wales. This is shit. I want to be in the video game. You don't want to take me away from this place, please. That was the discourse of VR in the 90s. It was going to be huge. It was going to be absorbing. It was going to be the next big thing. Sega were going to make a VR headset. And they did. The now defunct service games of Japan, Sega, second biggest console maker at the time, they made a VR headset in 1994. They never released it because everyone that put it on threw up. All the time. Everyone that put it on threw up. Nintendo did make a VR headset and released it in 1995. Guess what happened? Everyone threw up. And it was a bit like, you can still, I mean, they're really expensive now, but you still see them come up on eBay every now and again. It was a bit like, you put this thing on, and it was like somebody had taken a needle to your eyes and poked out all the colour receptors. Everything was shades of red. It was like, you know, like a really bad kebab shop, right? And you got that neon sign, like best, every town has got like best kebabs, right? And you know, it's in a red neon sign. That's what everything looked like. It was not healthy. It was not healthy to do. At the time, the enthusiasm for VR was part of a euphoric, techno-utopian expectation of the period. early 90s, the digital was going to transform the world. And VR was going to be a massive part of that. We were finally going to move into the post-industrial age. Everything would be information, everything would be digital. And VR was going to be a key part of that. Can anyone tell me why it didn't happen? Any particular reason why virtual reality did not become it? I mean, if you look at this image from 1992,
Cost, maybe, is it? Too
It's not
expensive? Yeah.
but in what sense? What cost?
To have
element?
the actual unit for people to buy the VR units, headsets and whatnot, or maybe to make.
Cost of research.
Cost of research, cost of production, cost of units. Yeah, in 1992 you could, in theory, and indeed Jaron Lanier's VPL company made a unit called, interestingly, the iPhone. A very interesting name for something, but it was EYE phone, which it wouldn't look bad today in terms of how it rendered virtual reality. It's a little bit less high quality than the equipment that you can buy today, but it's not radically bad in that sense. It cost $500,000 to purchase. The cheapest unit that they made, that they managed to manufacture and sell any, was $50,000. And that wasn't very good, and that made you throw up in a big way. I mean, we're talking buckets. So, at the time, the desire was there. The discourse about how this would be amazing was there. But the technology wasn't there. The actual link between what you could achieve and what you were aiming to do was not there. Fast forward from the early 90s to the mid-2010s. So we're basically asking you fast forward nearly 30 years here. The gap closes. Finally get to a point where the technology is available and cheap enough to make this a commercial viability. What has happened in the meantime, though, is that society has moved on. The techno-utopianism of that period in the 1990s has disappeared. That is not society today. Instead, we have a form of techno-dystopianism. In the interim period, we have seen the development of the internet, the consolidation of the internet by a few major companies, Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook, the enclosure of the internet, and the development of a new form of capitalism. Anyone want to tell me what the new form of capitalism is? You're all engaged in this module. It's been mentioned. Shoshana Zuboff will be crying right now if nobody knows the name of it.
Media?
Hmm?
Is it media?
No. Surveillance capitalism. Familiar with this term?
Yes.
Surveillance capitalism based on the idea that the entire operation of capitalism in the modern age is about collecting as much information from people as possible and using that to make them into more efficient data subjects to be sold to advertisers. You surveil everything. This was not part of the discourse when VR was going to be a huge thing in the 90s. VR was just going to be this revolutionary new thing where we could actually escape the crappiness of our world and go into a technological utopia where everyone will be free. Where if you want to, you can fly. Because you can do that in VR. You can do whatever you want. You can be wherever you want. You can have whatever life you want to have. You are not constrained by the physical world. It's a beautiful dream. It ain't gonna happen. The digital and the way that society has evolved alongside digital technology has meant that when VR re-emerges in the mid-2000s, in the mid-2010s, that vision is gone. And that techno-utopian discourse, through a series of events, I mean, Martin Lister and his colleagues argue that, you know, the Silicon Valley crash of the early 2000s is a major point in this. I'd argue more that the emergence of, in particular, Facebook in 2004 is a major impetus in this. The transformation of the economy and society itself in the digital age has meant that the utopianism of VR has disappeared. Now, instead of thinking, well, VR is a place we can escape to, VR is now a kind of prison. Now, instead of thinking, right, I can put this headset on, I can go anywhere I want, the companies who are making the stuff are thinking, yeah, you put the headset on, bitch, and we will measure the shit out of you. We will measure exactly what you look at, because we're going to be tracking your eyes. We're going to be putting sensors in this thing that touches your head right here to measure particular activity. We're going to be measuring galvanic skin response. We're going to be measuring your heart rate. We're going to be doing all these things, and you're going to tick the box on the terms and conditions that says we can do this as well. Does anyone ever read the terms and conditions? No? I'm sure in the terms and conditions of some things there is, like, you know, there's a clause in there that says you are saying that I can sew you into another person as a form of bizarre human centipede. And, like, Bezos is planning to do this with me. Okay? And I've ticked okay, because I haven't read the terms and conditions, right? So I've said this is okay to do. So, VR was seen in a particular way. It is now seen in a very different way. Technology of the 80s was not mature enough. When there was a vision for virtual reality that perhaps was revolutionary, the technology certainly wasn't there. By the late 2010s, the technology has begun to surpass that vision. Now, the promise of virtual reality still lasts on from those 80s and 90s halcyon days of VR. The potential of VR is a kind of worldhood or feeling of world that can be made in a medium that is totally immersive and totally artificial. VR is different to other technologies and other media in particular because it promises to perfect immersion in a particular way, that it will be fully immersive. We've all felt immersion in media. You know, you've watched a movie, television program, everything else is blocked out. You are just in that moment. We all feel that. But it takes a certain special set of conditions in order to do that. The idea underpinning VR is that because of the nature of how it's put together and, you know, engineered, it's going to be immersive, full stop. You are going to put a headset on, you are going to sensorily deprive people of things, you are going to control sound and vision and touch. This will embody people in a particular way. You're going to make their attention focused in a particular way, and this will be purely immersive on that basis. This is the promise of it. This is also the danger of it, in many ways as well. But it is a medium with interactive affordances. The danger of this, I think, comes from what the potential of that is. If you perfect the technology and you create something which is genuinely deeply immersive, then you have the potential to build virtual worlds which are more desirable to exist in than this world. That's when problems begin. Being immersed could be very, very intense as an experience, but if you can build something which people actually want to exist in and spend a prolonged amount of time in, then you open up all sorts of possibilities, good and bad, for what you can do with those environments. But basically, since the mid-2010s, this has opened up as a series of questions. Who is making VR, and why are they making it? Because if they can realize the potential of VR, we need to understand why they are doing this. You've got to look at what companies are involved, what are their aims, what do they actually do, and how does this extend their business model? Who is making the metaverse? Somebody tell me.
Meta.
Meta. Who are Meta?
Facebook.
Facebook. Why did they rebrand?
Because they wanted to own the meta.
Yes, basically they want to own the entire conceptual space that the metaverse exists in. Are Facebook a good company?
No.
Why not? Zuckerberg, he looks nice. I see him on television.
Same.
That weird head of his, he looks pretty cool. I see him in congressional hearings, lying about what his company does. What's wrong with Facebook? They're so good. They allow people to connect and keep connecting with one another. So why are they bad?
You take information without your full knowledge,
Mm.
It's
without your full consent.
getting
Okay.
back to the surveillance capitalism. They're
Which-
the one who's
Why is that a bad thing? What are they doing that's so bad?
People need their privacy, so you can't just take.
Privacy schmivacy. What privacy? You know, I always find it interesting, right, about privacy. You all have one of these, right? Yeah? You know there's an RFID chip in it.
Take mine out.
Good lad. University's invading privacy, it knows where you are. Privacy schmivacy, who needs privacy anyway? I'm an open book. You guys can know about what I do. I don't do anything that bad. It's a fair point, it's a fair point, right? It's a fair point. Facebook as an organisation. What is it that they actually do? Who is their customer? Okay, if they're a business, business has a product and has a customer. That's a simple, I'm not in the school of management, but I think I've got the idea here, right? I think I could probably lecture a course on advanced economics at this point because of that. Businesses have a product which they sell to customers. What's Facebook's product?
Us, the users.
People. Who do they sell people to?
Advertisers.
Businesses. Yeah. Facebook produces people. Us. And then here comes the bit where it's like, yeah, but I don't use Facebook. Yeah, we use Instagram. It's the fucking thing. Do you know what I mean? It's exactly the same thing. Yeah, but I do use WhatsApp. I use the web. Yeah, they're tracking you all the way across it because they've got thousands of millions of bots across the place developing these profiles. You got to look at who is building what. Okay. I teach about video games, and in the early 2000s, Microsoft got into the console industry. And I said, why did Microsoft get into the console industry? Microsoft had this huge business providing operating systems and software that ran on operating systems for businesses all across the world and for personal computing users as well. Why would they get into the computer game industry, Leighton? Because it was a market that they didn't have. They were satisfying a need of their business to consolidate in markets that they didn't touch through those other products. So you just get into the computer game industry, all of a sudden you have children. Valuable source of information, children. Children buy dumb stuff. Right? Got the child market now. Facebook have a business model, incredibly successful. Billions of people on their platforms on a daily basis. They are consolidating information about all of us all of the time. Great. So what does VR do for Facebook?
More information.
More information. More specific information. More granular information. Information that you cannot capture on the platforms that they have at the moment. Information about physical things that happen within us, which you're not going to get on Instagram. Now, Instagram measures how long you stay looking for an image for. But this is a very rough measure of attention. I could be looking at Instagram, put my phone down, and it's on that image. They're measuring how long I've stayed on that image, but it's no indication of actual focus and attention on what that has stopped scrolling on. In virtual reality, you know But you don't just know what somebody's looking at, you know how they're looking at it. Because if we're looking at something with interest, we have pupil dilation. Because our pupils react to levels of arousal that we have from images that we see. When we see something pleasurable or something we want, our pupils will dilate. Facebook can now measure that. Because their eye tracking technology in their headset measures your eye movements in that way. So instead of having a pretty good guess about what attention is, now you know. So, the potential here can go either way. You have the potential in VR to create something quite revolutionary. A new plane for human existence, where you can remove boundaries like physical constraints on us, cultural constraints on us. Get rid of them all. Create an entirely new world where we can all live happily while being surveilled constantly, and being churned constantly as well. Utopia, dystopia, very similar things. We've seen the representation of these kind of worlds in science fiction for a very long time. The first appearance of the word metaverse comes in 1992 from this novel, Snow Crash, by the science fiction author Neil Stephenson. So we're talking 30 years ago this year, Stephenson evoked the idea of the metaverse. In Snow Crash, the metaverse as Stephenson envisages it is a virtual reality world where to access it you have to have a head-mounted display, you are embodied in it, you have a sense of activity in it. You can move around, you can do things, you can interact with people. There are cities in Snow Crash's metaverse. There are areas to live in. You can buy a house in the metaverse, you can buy an apartment. You can conduct drug deals in the metaverse because that happens in the book. It's not a nice place. Stevenson saw it not as a utopia but as a dystopia. That kind of follows on from other visions of it, although it's not really a metaverse type world. William Gibson's 1984 book Neuromancer proposes a virtual world of this kind as well, not quite with the same scope as the metaverse, which is also dystopic in the way he looks at it. The 1999 film Existence by David Cronenberg. You've been shown this? You've heard of it?
I've heard of it, actually. I've seen it.
You need to watch it. If you're doing the MSc in VR, you need to watch that film. It's literally about a VR designer. Okay? It's incredibly dystopian as well. Yeah? It's a really good film, but it's really dystopian. I mean, the classic one that people always think of is The Matrix. The Matrix is a great example of how a metaverse has been conceptualized in popular fiction. Literally, in The Matrix, we are all plugged in to a consensual hallucination generated by computers, while those computers harvest our organs, effectively, while we are unaware of it going on. That could be happening. Has anyone considered that? You all think this is real. This could be a computer hallucination. You could be in like a pod right now, having your blood harvested by a machine. I mean, if that's happening, what are we going to do? Point I'm making here is that the representations of a metaverse traditionally have been quite dystopian. The idea that if you create a virtual reality world, most people who write about this in fiction think, this is going to be really bad. This is going to suck big time. This is going to be human enslavement on an entire species scale. So again, it's interesting why a company that are so dark at heart, like Meta, want to make this. A company run by a man who, it appears to me, when I look at Zuckerberg and hear him speak, is a psychopath. Has no idea that other people have feelings, and doesn't seem to have any feelings of his own. Interesting guy, tells me a lot that if I stop having feelings and I stop thinking about other people having feelings, I'll get rich. I'm thinking of doing this. because I'm just not earning enough in this university. If I actually stop caring about anyone, I might make it. It's too late for me anyway, but keep this in mind, you guys. All right? If you want to make it big in media, become a psychopath. I conceptualize this as this whole idea that there is a distance between the promise of VR and how it's going to be as a technological lag, I call it in the book. It's referring to an idea called the cultural lag from 1934. Now, the cultural lag is the phenomena that culture takes time to catch up with technology. What I've argued in my book is that actually what we have here is technology taking time to catch up with culture. The technology of VR took so long to advance to a stage where it was commercially viable that culture itself had moved on. And therefore, the promise of virtual reality, and if you like, the utopian vision of virtual reality to create a lovely new world for all of us where we can all be happy, culture has moved on from there, and now VR is being positioned not to make us happy, but to improve the mass surveillance of us by digital media companies. Nobody has criticised. I come up with ideas all the time in books, and there's usually a couple of years it takes, and then somebody will write something in a journal. It's like, Evans 2015 is an imbecile. And I'm going to tell you why now, but nobody's done it with that idea. So this tells me one of two things. Nobody's read the book. I don't think that's true. Or that was actually a reasonably good idea. So, the radicalism has been co-opted by basically one social media giant, Facebook. So in contemporary society, when we're thinking about virtual reality, from a consumer perspective, we have to contend with this idea that if virtual reality does get big, if Mark Zuckerberg's huge billion-dollar bet wins, we're going to have entirely created virtual worlds by a company that we know is purely interested in transforming us into being a product. That their entire MO is, we're going to take you and make you into a little bundle that we can sell to them. And that's going to be the virtual worlds that we're going to exist in, if this happens. I am deeply skeptical that this will happen, not just from the idea that the company that's doing it is very, very evil, but like the scale of what a metaverse would actually involve, and that's the subject of the book that came out last month, is so huge that it almost seems like an impossible task to even begin. It's like one of the most bonkers things that anyone's ever set up. It's like, I'm going to make a world where you can do everything. So, what do you mean, Mark? And it's like, well, you will be taught. You will socialize. You will exercise. You will shop. You will date. You will be physically intimate